Hello, everyone. This is Rick with the Cyber Pro podcast, where individuals share their insights because 5 questions in 9 minutes, hackers never sleep. Question number one: who are you and what do you do?
So I'm Ken Muir. I work for a company called LCM Security. I've been in the industry since about 1993. I've been a hands-on technical person. I come from a business background as well, so it's allowed me to get to the level where I'm at right now, which is kind of like a virtual CISO for a number of different organizations that don't really need a full-time CISO, and there wouldn't really be enough work for somebody like that. So that's where I help to kind of bridge that gap.
Wonderful. I'm already going to throw out an additional question here because you and I had chatted about this prior to the podcast. You're a global thought leader. What does that mean? And what does global cybersecurity mean to you?
So the global aspect to it really is that because cybersecurity is a common problem across the globe, but it's not really specific to any country or nation. I mean, there's different challenges around these things depending on the countries themselves, but overall, it's really the same thing. So, working with other people that are like-minded and really kind of looking at things from a global perspective, when we're looking for solutions, they're not based on just individual technologies or individual processes that people might use to prevent these threats from becoming a real life situation. But the idea is to really come up with solutions that are more pertinent to what a global community would need themselves, and try to bring all these people around the world to a common understanding, and it helped to simplify the problem. Not that it's simple in any way, but at the same time it's very complex. The challenge is around how can we simplify the solution around this problem.
That's wonderful. We got super deep, super quick, but let's go to the original question number two, and that is, why do you love being a cybersecurity professional?
It's it's interesting because when I first got into this, it just seemed like a novelty, really. Because I mean, in 1993, people didn't even know what the internet was, right? And then I was starting to learn straight away that there was already a problem with it. And so I started researching, what really was going on. And as time went by, it just became very interesting. I developed my hacking skills based in the late 90s. I developed my network engineering skills in the mid 90s. And so the combination of these things really helped me to understand how you could perpetrate this type of stuff within an organization's network. And it was just niche, very, very interesting. It was more interesting than just continually building computer systems and installing applications. It was taking you into a different world. I think X-Files had a lot to do with my fascination with this as well. Back in the day, I used to love watching that show because it just inspired the imagination. Obviously I had no idea where it would go because, who was to know it was going to be the massive thing that it is today back then.
I remember that show, man. Gillian Anderson.
Yeah.
Oh man. Question number three. Cybersecurity is a top concern. What does that mean to you?
So the irony is it's always meant something to me. It's just that, in most recent times in the last few years, it's starting to bubble to the surface as being the concern that it should have always been. If you put this in terms of numbers, like we're on track for losing around $6 trillion this year in ransomware and all other forms of threats and stuff from these cyber criminals. But I mean, companies were losing hundreds of millions even in the 90s. So this is not something where we lost a couple of bucks a few years ago and now it's all of a sudden 6 trillion. This has been a thing that's been growing for all that time. And so because it's become more visible and has grabbing a lot more media attention, and it's starting to touch areas that are really affecting our daily lives. Messing around with somebody's water treatment plant, bringing down an entire pipeline, all these other things. That what it's showing people is that the threat's real. And it's beyond just messing with a single organization. These are things that are actually, affecting whole nations. Not so much, the water treatment plant, for instance, was specific to Florida, but it shows that it could happen anywhere, and that we really, really need to start taking this more seriously.
No, I think that's an amazing piece of insight. Question number 4, what piece of insight specifically do you want to share with our community?
So, in doing this all these years, you can imagine, when I read about this stuff voraciously with my own research and people, I've been lucky to meet over the years. But one of the things I guess that I've learned to understand is that the reason why most organizations are really failing is because they're not following industry best practice and standards. These things are already built. They already exist in the form of NIST in the various standards. There's CIS, there's ISO 27000 series. Like, these things are already built. These are your guidebooks on how to be secure. But what I find is that most organizations are just shooting from the hip when it comes to cybersecurity. It's like, they're buying the best firewall on the market, where they don't really understand that these cyber criminals don't really care what firewall you have. It's not what they're going after. And in a lot of presentations that I do, I actually show people, I don't actually do it, but I've taken screenshots to show people the process of, how could I break into your organization? And I show them an example where there's a website that I can go onto, and it basically has, a bunch of credentials that I can buy. It shows me where the access to your organization exists, the weak points. These things are already cataloged and categorized on and available on the internet. Nobody's sitting around, trying to figure out what does this company have for vulnerabilities. These things are already done. Everybody knows that every company in the world gets scanned continually, and for those reasons, like, they get cataloged and they're put into databases that anybody can access. So, but one of the things that I've seen in person, personally, because I've also been a part of building this, is helping organizations to develop proper strategies around industry best practices. Because that way you're confining yourself to what the industry is recommending you should do, as opposed to just guessing. So what we have right now is not an industry best practices approach to most organizations. It's more around industry best guessing. And these things are costly and they don't work. I mean, here in Canada alone, we have hundreds of thousands of companies that have been taken down by ransomware, hundreds of thousands. And so if you went to any one of these companies and said, what do you have for technology solutions? They're all going to tell you, well, we bought the best solutions on the market. Well, why did you still get taken down then? Because it's not what you buy, it's how you use it. It's how does it fit into a grander strategy? And then, how does that then translate to business logic that a business or board members and executives can understand? Because you're just buying stuff because you think it's a great idea is not a strategy. But the companies that are, successful at this are the ones that have are working with industry standards, and B, have the discipline to make sure that it's, effectively in place and that it's managed and maintained, because it's not a fire and forget, I bought the thing, plugged it in, and it's great. It doesn't work like that. You have to be constantly managing these things. And so without those levels of discipline within organizations, they're just failing at cybersecurity on a continuous basis. We only have 1.3 million businesses in Canada. And when you have 500,000 companies that have been taken down, that's a massive amount of companies. And a lot of these companies don't survive this. This is one of the things that really needs to be understood. It's well documented that 60% of businesses, small to medium-sized businesses, go out of business after a major breach after about 6 months. And a lot of times they can't defend the damage to their reputation. If I'm a small 10-person company, and I'm speaking from experience, and I have a contract with Coca-Cola, and I lost some of their IP because my security wasn't good, you're not going to survive that. And this is one of the things I'm seeing happening more and more, is that partners and other organizations that have partnered with people, they're now insisting that they prove that they have good security practices in place, proven practices, meaning that it's not enough to say I have it, but I need to provide evidence to show you that I have it. And this is happening more and more as well. And I think that's also contributing to this sort of more general awareness around security.
That almost seems like we could write an extra chapter in The Art of War, but focus it on cybersecurity. So, question.
sorry, I got to respond to that.
Please do. That's perfect.
So I read The Art of War in 1995, and I've read it probably a dozen times since. There wasn't really a lot written back then, but I used that book to actually inform my thought process around how I develop secure networks and practices and stuff long before all these best practices came out. That was my book. And I believe in that book. You know, there should be another section in CIS on this that says, you know, you need to read this book.
I totally agree. I love that book. I think you're onto something. Maybe you need to author the Art of War Cybersecurity Edition. And
you know, I did think about that once. I was thinking about writing a book that said, you know, if Sun Tzu was a cybersecurity professional, what would he say, right?
Nice. Question number 5. What's your favorite piece of retro technology that just makes you smile?
So, you know, it's funny. That was probably the most difficult question of all the questions that you have, actually, was that. But you know what came to mind, actually, was when I was at college, you know, everybody was playing Space Invaders and stuff. I always remember this one machine that I went on. It was a 3-dimensional sort of a tank fighting thing. It wasn't very, you know, 3D. It was very 2D at the time. And I loved playing this game. But the trouble was with it is that, you know, being a poor student, I couldn't afford the 25 pence that it cost to run the game, you know, for the amount of times that I was enjoying it. You know, I'm working on the statute of limitation here. Is that what I figured out was the 5 pence piece, which was smaller than the 25 pence piece, could work if I actually spun it in the coin slot. So if I actually spun the coin, it would bounce up and down inside the chamber and then pretend to be a 25 pence coin. So I used to get 5 times as many games out of it. And then I became a champion because I was able to play so many games. I used to play against other people, but I love that game. It was so good.
Oh man, I love it when people rehash those fun memories like that. It was epic having you on, Ken. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It was good to meet you.